Hello! Time to talk about Wheel of Time episode 4. Um, from what I'm seeing online, the almost universal, unanimous opinion that I share seems to be that this is the best episode so far. Um, and I absolutely agree with that. This episode is like a 9 out of 10, I would say. I do still have. Okay, let's get the not so interesting criticism out of the way, like the one that has nothing to do with the narrative and that I don't really have anything much to say about, but I do want to acknowledge. Full spoilers, by the way. The forest battle looks awful. Like, it looks bad. Um, I don't know if it's the lighting, the set, the location, uh, the 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 editing. I don't know what it is, but the entire sequence after the scene where Alana stops the arrows and then turns them around, and before the scene where uh, all the Aes Sedai make it to the cave and confront Logain. Like, everything between those two moments looks like it had a tenth of the budget of the rest of the show. Um, I don't know what's up with that. And I don't really care. It doesn't like materially what significantly make the episode worse for me. I do just want to acknowledge it that yes, that whole sequence looks real bad. Which I did know was going to be the case based on the trailers. Like, it looked really bad in the trailers too. Um, and unlike some other stuff that looked bad in the trailers, like Leandren's outfit, it doesn't look any better in the show. Uh, that being said, let's handle this plotline by plotline, leaving the main one for the end. Um, so the least developed plotline in this episode, just like the last one, and the least interesting one, is Perrin and Egwene. Um, which is unfortunate. I feel like the absence of Elias is really, really hurting them here. Um, I feel like this plot line for the past two episodes has felt like it's just kind of there to fill the space. Like, nothing meaningful is really there. It's kind of hollow, and I feel like the issue is the absence of Elias. Now, the last episode was a very Rand and Matt heavy episode, and this was a very Nynaeve, Lan, and Moraine heavy episode. So I'm guessing that the next episode, episode 5, is going to be a very Perrin and Egwene heavy episode. So it's possible that the next episode will actually save that particular storyline, and I'm hoping it will. Um, so I'm going to withhold judgment on the adaptation of the Perrin Egwene Book 1 storyline as a whole until I see the next episode. And after that, they should probably be getting back together, I'm assuming, in episode 6, based on the episode titles, I think. Because episodes 7 and 8 have titles that pretty heavily imply that they're back together by that point. Um, so yeah, I don't have much to say about the Tuathan. They're more nuanced than they were last week. I take back some of my criticisms. It feels less like a stereotype of Romani people now. They're more like fleshed out. There's more meat on the cultural bones there. I'm glad they're going into the way of the leaf early on. That's very important for Perrin in particular. I'm honestly kind of surprised that they cut Elias but kept the Tuathan and Aram in the story. Because I feel like Aram is a much more cuttable character, I guess, than Elias. And if I had to pick one of those two storylines to do, I would have definitely picked Elias over the Tuathan. But be that as it may, it's a choice, I guess. Maybe they'll put Elias in later. And this storyline did kind of make me feel a bit better about the whole Layla thing in episode 1. Because having the whole, like, what has that axe ever done for you conversation that Perrin has with Isla, I believe, that conversation hits different considering that he used that axe to accidentally kill his wife. And it's in general just a much it makes the beginning of that whole arc for Perrin, the whole hammer or axe thing that he has in the books, it makes it much more compelling, I guess, much more meaningful, because in the books they kind of start doing the whole, oh, I hate this axe thing before he's ever really done anything with it, from what I remember. And it does, like, get much worse once he actually kills someone with the axe. But it feels like it starts out of nowhere, like he's just, like, he has theoretical issues with the axe, I guess, at the beginning. And this sort of grounds that, much like how the changes to Matt's backstory make his character make more sense. So I still, now, in the time between this and the last episode, I actually saw a post on Reddit by Brandon Sanderson, where he went into some detail about stuff that he himself argued with Rafe about for the show, and I strongly recommend you look that up, because it's actually an incredibly candid conversation of the kind we never get with television shows, because everyone's always, like, contractually obligated to be positive, and Brandon is very open about some of his criticisms and what he likes, and I mostly agree with like almost everything he says. The one thing that he does say, which didn't even occur to me, but which I was immediately like, oh, they should have done that instead, is that instead of Perrin killing Layla, it should have been Master Luhan. Like, they should have, like, the actual idea of Perrin accidentally killing someone in episode 1 and then grappling with the guilt going forward is a good one. It's just that the decision to create this whole new female character, have her be his wife, and then have that happen to her, feels a bit cliche. I think it would have been much better if the person he killed had been Master Luhan. It would have been less emotionally intense, I suppose, than killing his wife. But even that might be an improvement, because frankly, the level of horror and anguish that would be caused by something like this is kind of off the charts and kind of difficult for the show to properly portray. Like, so far, Perrin does not feel, I guess, adequately miserable, if that makes sense. And I don't think that's a failing of the show. I don't think they could have made him adequately miserable, like, without focusing the entire show on his grief. Because they went with one of the most traumatic and horrifying events they could possibly have thought of. And I think that was a mistake. I think they overplayed their hand there. Anyway, I've talked way too long about the least interesting storyline in this episode, so moving on. Rand and Matt, very interesting stuff going on here. I really like the idea that Tom and theoretically the audience would read Matt's dagger issues as early signs of channeling. That's such a brilliant idea, and I'm honestly surprised that Jordan didn't do that, because in hindsight, it's such an obvious choice. In this world, where specifically men have this very specific symptom that happens to them when they are channelers, it makes perfect sense that that is the first thing everyone would think of when a young man around that age, around the right age to start channeling, starts suddenly behaving really weird. That was fantastic. Also fantastic, the sort of bait and switch where they walk into the room and it looks like Matt slaughtered the Grinwells, but then it turns out it was a fade. Or was it? I think we might get a flashback later on where it turns out that it was Matt, if they're going for a very dark path with him, which they seem like they are. So I'm keeping an eye out for that. I'm not fully convinced that the Fade killed those people. And also Matt being so possessed by Mashadar that it's literally, at least I interpreted it this way, Mashadar speaks through him to the Fade when he like points his dagger at it and orders it to reveal itself. Which makes perfect sense. Mashadar is able to sense the shadow and it hates the shadow. So that works. And the aesthetic of Mashadar, which I complained earlier, the fact that it's like a black rot instead of wispy fog, now it works better. Like seeing it come out of Matt's mouth, it's I still wish that we'd gotten the fog when we were actually in Shadar Logoth, but I see why they changed it now. I don't agree with the decision, but it makes sense. What else happened there? Oh yeah, also there were lots of like nice little references for book readers. The little girl was named Elsa. That was Elsa Grinwell, which is something that's never said in the text, I'm pretty sure. It's just because I was watching with the subtitles on, like I always do, and so I knew that her name was Elsa from the subtitles. That's a nice little nod to the books, because Elsa Grinwell is a character who is fairly memorable, at least to me, from the first book, but who is utterly irrelevant to the plot, and she keeps coming up later on, but she keeps being utterly irrelevant, so it would be stupid to try and adapt her to the screen one-to-one. But having this random little girl be Elsa Grinwell is a nice little nod. It's like, oh, I know who that is. That's fun. And then she dies, which is horrifying. And the second nod that I really liked was that her doll was named Brigitta. Now, I'm hoping that that was more a case of, like, foreshadowing of the actual Brigitta, and not them putting in a fun little Brigitta Easter egg because they're not actually going to have Brigitta in the show. I really hope they have Brigitta in the show. I like Brigitta a lot. And I think she adds a lot of depth to stuff around the Horn of Valir and Teleran Riod and stuff like that. And she's very important for Elaine's character. So I'm hoping that the doll was less of an Easter egg and more of an actual bit of foreshadowing. That's, I think, about it for Rand and Matt's storyline here. And now we get to talk about the big storyline of this episode, which is Logain. I love what they're doing with Logain. The cold open was fantastic. Actually showing us Logain's rampage in Ghealdan is great. Ghealdan looks great. They picked a fantastic location to shoot that. His conversation with the king and with the voices in his own head, fantastic, great, I love that, fantastic bit of character work, and also world building to show what being a male channeler is like. And again, the we are priming the audience to interpret people who hallucinate voices and people who aren't there as like taint mad men. We are priming the audience to doubt the reality of Luce Theron when that happens, which is very good. I am very happy about that decision. That is great. So yeah, Logain, great. Alvaro Morte does a fantastic job with the character. He's very different than how I pictured Logain in the books, but then again, this is an aspect of Logain we never get to see in the books. We never see Logain as the false dragon. We only see Logain after he's been defeated. We get a brief glimpse of him between his defeat and his gentling, and then the next time we see him, he's already been gentled off screen. So, and that obviously makes him a very different character going forward. So I'm very, very glad that we get to see, like, pre-gentling Logain in his prime. Now, the other new characters in this episode are a bunch of Aes Sedai and their warders. And some of these are very interesting. Kareen, or Kareni, I believe they pronounce it in the show, is not very interesting. She dies. She's just there to die and to show off the effects of the warder bond. Presumably, a portion of next episode will be dedicated to explaining the effects of an Aes Sedai's death on her warder by showing us how her warder responds. So I don't have much to say about her. But the other two major Aes Sedai we meet are Lana and Leandren. Leandren doesn't have her braids, which is probably the right choice because, frankly, that mental image was always a bit silly and didn't quite work with her character, in my opinion. So, I really like the actress they got for Leandren. She's very, very intense and has a very distinct and memorable face. But they're also making some interesting changes to her, I think. So, when Kareni dies, and Leandren and Moraine are trying to shield Logain, Leandren almost burns herself out. Well, I guess we're not sure yet if burning yourself out stills you or kills you in this version of the story. Because it kind of feels like it might kill you from the way Moraine reacts. But then again, Aes Sedai view stilling is equivalent to death, so maybe? I don't know. Either way, she almost burns herself out fighting him, and Moraine warns her, and she's like, I don't care, he killed our sister. And it's very clear that she actually would have gone through with it if they hadn't been interrupted by the warder. And that's very interesting, because that is not something that Leandren would do from the books. Because, spoilers for book 2 here, Leandren is Black Aja. Leandren is a dark friend. Her whole thing is that she doesn't care about other people. She values herself more than anyone. And this is a very strong hint that that might not be the case for this version of Leandren. I don't have any idea yet why they might be doing that, but I'm interested. I'm interested in seeing what they do with Leandren. If they make her an actual, like, truly genuine, authentic Red Aja fanatic, that might be an interesting direction to go with her, although I'm not it might change too much. She might still have to be Black Aja. We'll see. We'll see when they... Probably not before Season 2. I doubt they'll get to any of the stuff where her allegiance is relevant until Season 2. But that scene was very interesting to me. Lana, also very interesting, because they're making her very likable and sympathetic and cute and charming. And considering what she does later on in the story and how that thing is framed within the books, that's a weird choice. So, of course, I think they wouldn't have introduced Lana as a major character this early on if they weren't going to do the thing I'm talking about, because that's like the only reason for Lana to exist in the story, the thing she does. In Lord of Chaos? Was it Lord of Chaos? I think it was Lord of Chaos. Yeah, Lord of Chaos. So the thing she does in Lord of Chaos is like the main reason for her to exist in the story. So she's definitely still doing that, but they might frame it differently in a more positive light or more sympathetic light. I'm not sure. And I'm also not sure how I feel about that decision if that's what they're doing. Or they might be planning to do like a really intense heel turn with her, like have that be a moment that's like, oh crap, she's actually really messed up. Like she's not the nice innocent lady we thought she was. So I'm on the lookout for that. So that's it for the new characters. Let's talk about that ending. Like the whole ending sequence there was really interesting. So I am no longer worried that they might be making Nynaeve the dragon. I had that concern after last episode. I voiced it in my video. I immediately realized after I posted the video that there's like no chance they're doing that. And in the week since, I think Rafe Judkins has done an AMA, and I've read some of the answers to the questions, and it seems pretty clear from those answers that they're not doing that. And even if he hadn't done that, this episode would have made it 100% clear that they're not doing that. Because they're so blatantly implying that she is the dragon this early in the season, there's no way that she actually is. So I'm 100% on board with this. I love the misdirection, actually. It's such good misdirection that it worked on me, who's read the books. Like, I got concerned after last episode. So I love the misdirection they're doing with Nynaeve. She did do something that would have been straight up impossible in the book, which is healing a bunch of people at once. I'm fine with that. Changes to minor rules of channeling like that are perfectly okay. So long as they're consistent, like if like 2 seasons down the line, they like explicitly say, oh, it's impossible to heal more than one person at a time, then I'm gonna be like, okay, you can't have it both ways. But if it's an actual consistent change that they're going to stick to, I'm fine with it. I really like the idea that Logain essentially just gives up and surrenders himself to be gentled because he in that moment realizes that he's not the dragon. Like, even if he doesn't necessarily immediately assume that Nynaeve is, the very fact that there is any channeler more powerful than him immediately means he can't be the dragon. Because the dragon is supposed to be the most powerful channeler. And personally, I think that him crying at the end is not because he's been gentled, it's because he realizes that everything he's done was not for the greater good. I think he's feeling remorse and horror at his own actions at this point, actually. He's like, oh god, I've killed so many people. I've done horrible things because I thought I was destined to save the world. And I just realized I'm not. And that's a great moment, I think, for Logain. And I'm really looking forward to see where that takes his character going forward. Because that's not really an element that's explored with Book Logain. Like, we don't really ever get any idea if Logain genuinely thought he was the dragon or not, for one thing. And this version of Logain absolutely thinks he's the dragon until that moment. So I think that's a cool change. What else happened there? Yeah, the actual gentling. The little speech that Leandren gives is really cool. It's a great line. The whole like something to let the hammer of the White Tower fall on you, Logain Ablar, and take from you that which nature itself does not wish you to have, or something like that. It was very effective. The visual of gentling is, I'm not in love with it. Mostly because it's like it focuses on like, this is gonna sound like a weird thing to say, but I feel like the visual of gentling should focus on the head and not the chest, if that makes sense. Because it's the mind that's affected. It's like it's a form of magical lobotomy. It's like making someone tranquil in Dragon Age, for example. So even though I know it's not supposed to be that, like it's supposed to just cut you off from the source and then that has a mental effect, I've always thought of gentling as something done to the mind. Even though, again, I realize it's technically not supposed to be. It's fine. It's fine. I just would have preferred a different visual, like maybe have the darkness, the dark weaves of Sidene like burst from the back of his head, like he gets blown out of him. But it's fine. It's still a really good visual. I like it. In general, I like what they're doing with channeling, mostly. I don't like specifically some of the stuff Logain does with channeling, though, because Logain seems to use his weaves themselves as weapons. Like, they treat the weaves like these sharp tentacles he uses to attack people with. That feels wrong. That's not how channeling works. Like the weaves aren't physical things. The weaves are supposed to affect physical things. Like, the weaves are supposed to create a fireball, or a lightning bolt, or a wall of air, or earth, or whatever. Having the weaves themselves be treated as these, like, physical appendages, almost, I don't like it. I mean, it's a really intense and cool visual, and if this weren't the Wheel of Time, I would love that as, like, a power for a villain to have, but it's just not channeling. It's not consistent with how channeling works. And this isn't me being, like, a book purist. It's not consistent with how channeling works in the show so far. Like, Kareni's death made no sense. What did he stab her with? I mean, I suppose you could argue that he, like, made a dagger of air? But I'm not sure that's a thing. Like, I don't think... Like, do we ever get any, like, examples of people actually, like, being stabbed with air? That... I don't know. Just something I'm noticing. Maybe it's a difference between Sidar and Sidene. Maybe going forward, it'll turn out that the show is going in a direction where Sidene has, like, this physical element to it. Maybe. We'll see. I'm still not entirely sure that they are even doing Sidar and Sidene in the show. By the way, it's unclear to me whether they have. I don't think they've established that there are two separate sources that men and women draw their channeling from, and that one of those sources is tainted. Because the way Leandren speaks to the nameless guy they gentle in episode 1 kind of makes it sound like it's all coming from the same source. I mean, obviously it's called the one source, but you know what I mean. It's coming from the same, like they're all channeling the same thing, but it's men themselves who have been changed by the Dark One, so that when the power passes through them, it becomes tainted. That might just be a turn of phrase that Leandren used. But personally, I'm fine if they decide to ditch the whole Sidar Sidene thing. Because it's not really a particularly necessary distinction. Like, they work pretty much the same. It's like there's some minor differences, but so yeah. Overall, best episode so far. Extremely excited for the future. One thing that Sanderson said in that post on Reddit is that episode 6 is his favorite. So I'm really looking forward to episode 6 because, well, I imagine few people have better judgment when it comes to the Wheel of Time than Brandon Sanderson. Some might argue better judgment than Robert Jordan ever had. But we won't get into that right now. That's, I'm not gonna... Well, I already did kick that beehive. I'm not gonna kick it any further. Okay. See you all next week for, episode 5. Which is probably about Perrin and Egwene, so I'm looking forward to that.